Continuing, Pei Alf Lacha Hey, we spoke about last time, machlokes between the Shach and the Rosh, that the Rosh learned that the only Yotzeh, which is mutter, is from kosher animals, is milk and eggs, and anything else is not kosher. And the Shach learns that there's a machlokes about exactly that point, and that the Mekilim but Mecholav hold that when the Torah was matter milk, it really meant to be matter every Yotzeh from kosher animal, and Mecholav included. Mecholav is not cholav, it's mutter, yeah. And so when the Torah, when Shulchan Aruch paskins that you're allowed to eat mei cholav, he's paskining that all yotzeh from a kosher animal is mutter. Come what may, it's always mutter if it comes from a kosher animal. That is to say, the yotzeh from an Ephraim and a Chai. That's what we're talking about for Ephraim and a Chai. Even though it's Ephraim and a Chai.
Yeah, like a Bates. Meaning, that's a separate discussion about, Bates seems the Shach would include that.
Bates of, you mean like actual eggs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually that's a riot to the Shach, that there are people who talked about why do we need a separate pasuk to be matter eggs when we already matter milk.
Right.
That whole discussion presupposes that the heter of milk includes everything that comes from kosher animal. In fact, there are Rishonim who bring rayas that eggs are kosher. He's like, why do we need rayas for it? That people talked about that. We talked about it way back when.
Yeah.
So Taka that supports the Shach.
Raya from Shulchan.
From Shulchan, correct. So they brought rayas, but then when people say afterwards, why do I need rayas? Why do I need a raya? Why do I need matter milk? That implies that one heter would have been enough. We don't need each specific one.
But then like some sofa says, so that heter is only applicable to Yisrael, it's not applicable to Akum.
We may talk about that next time. No, I'm up in the air whether I should talk about that or not.
Right.
That would be next time.
That wouldn't work according to the Shach.
Next time. Okay. That's the next time. Okay. Some type of passes like the Rush. You should just, for understanding. Okay. So, I want to talk about two applications of that din. Okay. It sounded very theoretical because, we had examples here in Shulchan Aruch of Meir Glayim and Yalei Derech Murta. We had a couple of examples, but nothing that most of us think of eating. So we have two examples to talk about that seemingly are totally machlokes between the Shach and the Rosh. And the really what our goal is, I'm going to say to you what they appear to be totally machlokes. In fact, most of what I'm going to tell you is going to be why it's not, and why everyone would be making a point to both sides. That's really what I'm coming to tell you. But at first glance, both of these are going to appear to be okay, and the first one is something called Colostrum. Okay, what's Colostrum? Colostrum is that before once a mammal gives birth, it has milk for its child. But before the mammal gives birth, right before it gives birth and right after, for the first couple of days afterwards, something else comes out of the mammary glands, and that's called colostrum. Okay, and colostrum, for example, when I read someplace that the way the farmers know that the goats are about to give birth is when they see that they have colostrum. Okay, that's like proof. They say, oh, the baby, they're going to give birth within the next 24 hours. It's a simon for them because that's what it is. It has milk. It has a milk-like substance before it gives birth, and then for the first couple days afterwards. That product called colostrum is very different than regular milk. It has lots of antibodies that the mother is passing on to the child. It has a higher protein level. It has, as you see in the picture here, it has a different color. It has less fat. It has a different makeup. and people eat this. There are people who consume colostrum, not necessarily from humans. They consume colostrum because for all this health benefits. Here the cow is trying to pass on certain special things to the baby before the baby gets, so to speak, real food. And people try to eat that. I read on Wikipedia, I have no idea if it's true, that in the Ukraine there's a cheese that's made out of this stuff. Okay? It's called, I can't pronounce it, it's called Molozivo. It's some kind of special, there's even a cheese made out of it. Okay. But,
so cheese can be made, it's like milk that cheese can be made out of it.
Right, yes, you can get cheese, I think it's a soft cheese. It's made out of it. So anyhow, so at first glance, we would say that this product is totally in the same machlokes the Shach and the Rosh. According to the Shach, it's for sure mutter. Right? We don't have a question according to the Shach that it's mutter because it's a yotzeh from a kosher animal. So yotzeh from a kosher animal is kosher. There's no problem. That's easy enough. Okay, the Shach is going to be is according to the Rosh. Should we say that at first glance we would say, well, according to the Rosh, it's yotzeh from a kosher animal. It's not milk, and therefore it should be treif.
I've never got a call from a mother.
Yeah.
Give me a second. I say just first glance. That's a first. If you look at those two things, don't look the same. Okay. 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 So.
Maybe for somebody to call me up with this shadow,
People do. No. People take it as a health product.
No, I'm talking about for the kid. I don't want it to make it great.
Got it. Okay. So there's somebody who's named Yoni Robinson. Okay, most of you don't know him. He lives in Queens. He's a professor of computers, if I remember correctly. But he had an interest in Kashrus issues. He used to do work with OU on as a volunteer on different projects. So one of them was about this. And he brought a raya. Okay, he brought a raya that it was mutter. Okay, so first, the raya that it's mutter is a good raya. And the raya is, the Gemara says in Chulun Daf Kufri Gimel, the Gemara talks about whether there's an Isser of Basar B'Cholav on Cholav Gedi Shaloi Hinika. Okay, Cholav from a Gedi that didn't nurse. Okay, what is Cholav Gedi Shaloi Hinika? So Rashi tells us that it means, it didn't come on very smoothly. Lo Yolda V'Olam. Okay, it never gave birth. V'yesh lo Cholav Kishi Kroiva Lidasa. Okay, so it sounds like a description of what we're talking about. Okay, it never gave birth, but it has a certain a milk kind of a product. Sure, sounds like what we're describing. Okay, I told you the farmers even look at it when they see that, they say, "Oh, it's about to give birth." And the Gemara has a clear whether there's an Issa Basar B'Cholav on it. The shayla of the Gemara is whether it is Chalev Imai because it's not an aim yet. It didn't give birth yet. So is it Chalev Imai because it's milk that's not coming from a mother. It's coming from a female, but not from a mother because it was never give birth yet. And the Gemara decides that yes, it is. It's possible to use this. So obviously, if it's possible, obviously it's pasha that it's mutter. Then the Gemara that's in the assumption. And even if it's even Chalev Imai. So what they said beforehand is that this stuff really, even though it doesn't look like milk, and it's very different than milk, but Pachas Yosher, it's milk, it comes from the same place, it has it's meant for the baby to eat, so for whatever reason, the Gemara assumed, to the Gemara it seemed partial that it was milk, the Chashayla was Chalev Imai, because it's not an aim yet,
Even if it's not Chalev Imai, you still see it would be mutter, because only Shayla
Right. The Gemara's clever is just about the second part. Is it challah from an aim? When the Torah says you can only not do basar in Chalev Imai, maybe this is excluded, and it is fine. Okay. So that's a raya, and when he brought this raya to Rabbi Shefter, to Rabbi Belsky, they were happy with the raya. Okay. Now, then there was a second child. Okay. A second raya. He wanted to bring a second raya. This they weren't happy with. Okay. The second raya is like this. The din is that Cholav Zachar, okay, is also mutter to eat. Okay, it's a din in Pei Zayin. It talks about whether it's a possible Cholav on Cholav Zachar. It says, next page. Sorry. Okay, I'm losing it here. Okay, B'chol Zachar, Potter. Okay, it's a shadow here in the Mechaber and the Rabbah whether it's possible Cholav or it's not possible Cholav, but it's mutter for sure to use it. Okay, well, Cholav Zachar is not Cholav. Okay, Cholav Zachar means Cholav that comes out of that part of a man's body. For a lady, you should be giving milk from there, and somehow it came out of the man, or from I guess it's a male animal. So the Gemara. If that's mutter, if that's considered kosher, then it means even something as far removed as that is from being milk is considered milk, then surely this colostrum should be mutter also. Okay? So in fact, that's what he wanted to bring right from it. The truth is like this. There's a pirush on the Issa V'Heter. Okay? On the Issa V'Heter, there's a pirush called Zer Zahav on the bottom. Okay? And that pirush, he asks, I saw this kasha is in Tani Shulchan, he brings this down from the Zer Zahav. He says, why Taka isn't Cholav Zachar Yotzeh? Why Taka? What's the reason? Why isn't Cholav Zachar considered a Yotzeh? Okay, he's not considering that maybe it should be considered to be really Cholav. Like this, the Colostrum, we a whole bunch of people here even said it themselves, and the Gemara said that it's considered Cholav. He says, Taka, why isn't it? He's talking there about whether it's possible Cholav or not. That's what he's talking about, what the Ramah holds, whether it is or is not possible Cholav. He says, but why Taka isn't it a Yotzeh why Taka isn't it a Yotzeh? So he says, he brings two rayas, that Cholav Zachar, he brings two rayas that things like this are not considered to be Isra at all. They're not even considered to be a Yotzeh. Okay? They're lower than the Yotzeh. He says it's a Zeya Be'alma. Okay? Now, the first of his rayas is exactly things that we talked about in our very first show on the Simon. Okay, a whole bunch of rayas, which is, if you remember the way we said it, we didn't exactly say this then, but the way we explained it was, the Torah asked you to eat basar. That's what you're not allowed to eat basar from a horse. Okay, you're not allowed to eat basar. You're also not allowed to eat the tam from a basar. You're not allowed to eat the certain other things. Now we say now eat Yotzeh, but there are things that are even less than Yotzeh. They're just Zeh B'Alma. Like L'Dugma, the Gemara says you don't make a very pretty eights on apple juice because it's only the Zeh of the fruit. It's considered like not the Ikar of the thing. It's only like a so removed. It's not even the Ikar. Not in the thing. So there's a darga that's lower than even Yotzeh, like the Zeh of a fish. I think in bugs. I forgot which ones are that. There's no din of Yotzeh on those animals because it has a lower level. It's called Zeh.
Zay and Pisha.
What? Pirsha means things that are be'etzim they would be Yotzeh, but because they're not in an edible form, they came out as not edible. They're qualified as Yotzeh, but they're not edible, and therefore they're not usher. But these things are like Zayah is like so, not even the Yotzeh. It's sort of like the din of Zayah is also by Zayah by it's a din by if there's moisture that forms, like condensation that forms from in a cold mikvah is is not considered to be even coming out of that thing. I'll say you joking afterwards. Anyhow, so he brings another right to that. The Shulchan Aruch says in. Everybody can be happy now. It's coming to Pesach. In Hilchos Pesach, it says you shouldn't bring your grains that you're going to be using the grains you're going to be using for making that you can use on Pesach for matzah. You shouldn't transport them on an animal if there's no saddle, or if there's no piece of leather over there, because or else the zayah from the animal will get into the grains. Zayah is machmet, so the zayah will turn the grains into chametz. There's two pshatim: either to warm up the grains, that's not going to get to us, or the other pshat is that the moisture that comes into the grains will turn them into chametz. So the Zayah obviously says, how come everybody's only worried about the Pesach part of it? Why are we only worried about the chametz part of it? Why aren't we worried about it being? Why aren't we worried about the Isser itself? So that is, he could have answered what you said. He could have said that it was Pirsha. He could have said that. But he says, no, you see from there that there are things that are called Zayah that they don't even count. They're like below even Yotzeh, like off the chart completely. Okay, so now, if we say that, if he's right, that the reason why Cholav Zachar is mutter is because it's not even the Yotzeh, it's below Yotzeh. We call it Zayah, it's even below Yotzeh. That's fine for Cholav Zachar, because Cholav Zachar is I don't know what it is, but it's not Cholav by any stretch. That heter wouldn't apply to Colostrum. So you're trying to make right, say if Cholav Zachar is mutter, then this is surely mutter. No. Cholav Zachar was mutter because it was off the charts. It wasn't even Yotzeh. But the Colostrum for sure is a Yotzeh. The Colostrum comes out just like milk does. I mean, it's just as with as much quantity and as much nutrition and as much use as the milk is. So you couldn't say if you want to say that the Cholav Zachar is mutter because it's Zayah, that's saying it's so nothing that it counts as it. So you wouldn't be able to bring a raya from there that the Colostrum is good mutter.
You don't need to bring a raya from there. You already have.
No, the second raya. I'm just saying the second raya was not a
raya. Quit while he was ahead. Yes.
Okay. It occurred to me to say it in the other order, so this way you'd feel better when I say the second. I said that right wasn't good right. This is a good right. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now I really said in this one because of the next thing I want to talk about. Okay, which is the other. So one thing that was a Yotzeh that we thought maybe was totally in the mouth like this. It's not totally, but we thought maybe was this thing called Colostrum. And the second one is Lanolin. Okay, what's Lanolin? Lanolin is it also goes by the name wool grease or wool wax, okay? And it is that it's beautiful. Find that it's beautiful. This is just the grass that the sheep eat. That's what you're looking at. I have a video at the end of it if you want. And what it is that excuse me, sheep, as you know, grow wool, and they get full of this bulky wool as it grows longer and longer, and their body excretes a wax, and that wax covers the sheep's wool, and it makes it water repellent, okay, and it helps protect. I don't think it's for the wool. I think it's for the sheep. It protects them by making this water repellent cover. It's like a wax on top of their wool, and when they shear the sheep, the wax could be as much as a quarter of the weight of the whole wool. Now, wool doesn't weigh very much, so it's not so hard to be a quarter of the weight, because wax is much heavier, much denser than wool is, but it's a considerable amount, and it keeps going the whole life. It just keeps on secreting this wax, and when it comes off the sheep, the people wash it off. Okay, the people who are cleaning the wool is part of. You okay?
Someone else will look down.
Wrong way. Okay. So when they clean off the wool, when they clean off the wool, when they shear it off the sheep, they clean off this wool.
I've had a sheep and it's soft.
I can't answer that question. Why it makes it? I'm not sure why it would make them soft and cuddly. Wax, it's a thin layer. It's like, there's wax on your apples also. Doesn't mean your apples don't taste. I didn't say apples are soft and cuddly. But a thin layer maybe doesn't make such a difference. But they wash it off. You can watch at the end, for anybody who wants to stay later for the popcorn, there's a video at the end to watch them taking care of it. I'd say put it afterwards so you can listen. And so they wash the stuff off and they recover it. Okay, it's mainly used for cosmetics. Okay, that's the main use it has in pharmaceuticals. I'm not sure exactly how they use it, but some kind of wax. But in more recent years, they figured out ways to use it in, go figure, bubblegum, and it's an emulsifier. And what's most important, what we most think about it is for vitamin D3. Okay, if you process it further, you make vitamin D3, not vitamin D2. Okay, if you're a vegan, you want vitamin D2. Okay, but everybody else, forget vitamin D3 comes from this. Okay, and the shaila was whether it's kosher or not. Okay, it comes from sheep, and the shaila is whether it's kosher or not. It's a pretty modern shaila because I don't think that people were using it for food uses until more recently. Okay, people have been using it, but I don't know for food uses. You'll hear the names. The names I'm going to quote are all contemporary people who are talking about the shaila. Okay, so again, before we go on to reasons to make it mutter, our first look at it is that according to the Shach it's mutter. According to the Shach, what is it? It's coming from a sheep. Sheep are kosher. Well, sheep are kosher, so it's Yotzeh from a sheep, Yotzeh from an Ephraim and a Chai. According to Shach, it's not a problem. It's for sure mutter. The Shach is what about according to the Rosh? It's the Rosh.
I apologize.
Sure.
Lanolin, we're talking
Lanolin.
Right?
Lanolin.
It comes from a sheep,
The sheep secretes it into its wool, and when you shear off the wool, they wash it off the wool. You'll see later.
Part of the wool.
Yeah, well, it comes off the wool. Okay, so the shaila is, should we say that according to the Rosh, it should be us? According to the Rosh, it's Yotzeh from a kosher, from an Ephraim and a Chai, from a living animal that you can't eat yet, so should it be us or not? Okay, that's what the shaila is. Not according to the shaila, according to the shaila, it's for sure mutter. Okay, you'll see. I'm going to quote people who also say, well, the shaila says mutter, so there's no problem. Okay, but the shaila is according to the Rosh. That's the shaila. Okay, so we have three reasons why it might be mutter. Okay, two of them are very similar, and one that's a little different. Okay, and the first is, Belsky wrote about it in a Masorah journal many years ago. And he says, yes, it's mutter, because it's not royal achila. Okay? He said, it's royal because it's not royal achila. He says, now some people wanted to tell him, that's what he says, and that's why it's mutter. And then most of the truth is about the fact, he says, that people were trying to tell him that the lanolin, he says it's not royal achila because he says here is not royal achila. He says the din is in bones and here and certain other things like that are considered not royal achila. So this is here. Here is not royal achila, so you're allowed to eat it. He says now people try to explain to him. Most of what he had to say is people try to tell him that the hair and the lanolin are two separate items. Don't see them as one thing. Don't say this is here. Say this here and this lanolin. They're separate things. And he explained that we don't look at that. That's on a very scientific level. But
is here mutter to eat?
Yes, here's mutter because it's not royal achila. Here from a trait animal, like here from a horse, right? So it's, you're allowed to eat it. But he says this. But he says no, it's not true. We look at things. We know this from other places. We look at things from a lay perspective, and to an average person, you pick up a piece of wool. You'll see later. The guy's doing it. You pick up a piece of wool. The hair and the wool, and the wool and the lanolin are the same thing. They're both the same thing. You might be able to break it apart afterwards, so they're basically the same thing.
Why don't we use this for Pesach too?
Use what for Pesach?
The same svara.
Yeah,
I have perfume. I have something over here. This is not edible right now.
So what are you trying to say?
Just like you're saying this thing. Right now, this liquid here...
It's not edible?
It's not edible, so therefore it's mutter.
So why
is it in Israel comments? Because you're being...
On what? Comments on what?
Let's say perfume and all these things. It's not...
Okay, so there, the shayla has to do with... They put something edible into it. Those ones, they put something edible into it. Okay. So, he brings a riot. Now, he has a very interesting riot. And his riot is, the Gemara on Shabbos, I don't have that on the screen. The Gemara on Shabbos talks about doing hatmana in all different types of things. And the Gemara talks about doing hatmana in wool, actual wool right off a sheep, or wool made into clothing. And the Gemara talks about whether you could do hatmana in it, whether it has inherent moisture to it. Okay? And it gives descriptions of wool and even processed wool that has an inherent moisture into it. Okay? The Gemara doesn't say it's talking about this grease, but it sure seems like that's what it's talking about. Okay? It sure seems like it's talking about the grease that's on the sheep, because it talks about moisture or liquidy that comes from within the sheet, like coming from the thing itself, which, when you look at a sheet, that's what it is. That's what we call lanolin, what becomes lanolin, this grease which becomes lanolin. So he says, you see, the Gemara had a shayla about it, Indian, the hatmana shaboy. But the Indian, the fact that you're putting hot food into those pans, that didn't bother anybody. Nobody was bothered by the fact that you're putting hot pans in. The Gemara knew that it was there. It wasn't like we just discovered this new thing that there's this extra piece in there. The Gemara was well aware. The Gemara was talking about that maybe that's there, and how it, and again, to the whether it's Mosif Hevel kind of shaylas. And yet the Gemara says that it's Mosif. Okay? So, what we would question that raya from is like, it's a very interesting raya. What we question is like this. We said from Rabban Kotler and from Moshe that both of them said that when a food is not royal achila, they were talking about bones, they're talking about gelatin. When something's mutter because it's not royal achila, it's only mutter, if I could use the word, temporarily. It's only mutter while it's in royal achila. If it later becomes royal achila, it goes right back to being asr. So that with Indian gelatin they were talking about was, if you have gelatin made out of bones, the bones are mutter, but bones are not really mutter. Bones from horses are not really mutter. Bones from horses are only mutter because they happen to be in royal achila. If we later make them to be royal achila, like we pashka with them to the point that they become gelatin, marshmallows, then if we make them royal achila, then they are asr. They were just temporarily asr. So and therefore gelatin should be asr. Therefore gelatin made out of these bones should be asr. So he says, so the same thing applies to the hair also. If we have hair, and we say the hair, you're allowed to put your clothes into it. Why? Because the hair is not royal achila. But the hair is only temporarily not royal achila. If we have a way to turn it into vitamin D that goes into our milk, well, now it became royal achila. So the Gemara is being mattered in the case. The Gemara is being mattered in the case we're using it where it's still not royal achila. So at that point, nobody eats wool. Nobody eats their wool. Of course, it's not royal achila at that point. If we do a whole bunch of steps to it, it turns into vitamin D or it turns into chewing gum. Okay, good. So if we do all those things, then it becomes usher. It doesn't mean it's usher then. It's only mutter in its original form when it's not royal achila, like in bones. If you take the bones and you make them royal achila, so to speak, then they become usher. Okay, so that's why we could question. That right? It's really, it was very interesting, right? I'm just not convinced that it's that's going to be right. Now we have a possible answer for him with the second shot. Okay, the second shot might better explain what Rebelski wants to say. I don't think it's what he wants to say, but we could reword him into what he wants to say.
Never asked Rabbi Boltzmann?
I didn't answer this question. No. Okay. There's somebody named Diane Padua, grandfather of the current one. If you want to say Chesha Feifut, he says maybe the reason why the lanolin is kosher is because it's pirsha. Okay, he said maybe it should be pirsha, which is to say, since nobody considers this wool, this wax coming off to be edible. I mean, no regular person who would look at this wax would consider it edible. So then it should be pirsha. So before I go on to tell you about that, I have to just tell you that he himself is very apprehensive about saying that it's mutter for that. He says, the Gemara says, has to bring rayas about this yali diachmurta, whether, the shuli shachamar nertziboy, is it not royal achila? He says, there's a machlokes rishonim, based on the machlokes in the Gemara, whether meirag laim is considered royal achila. He says, I'm not so quick to, whether it's pirsha, whether you consider pirsha. He says, I'm not so ready to say something is pirsha until I really know better that it really is. I'm not convinced. There's another sefer called Yeshua's Moshe, from someone named Rabbi Aronson from Petach Tikva, who said that when he saw a sample of the lanolin, he saw a sample of it, and he said, he wasn't so convinced it was not royal achila. He says, if he would have cooked with it, maybe b'shas avchach you can cook with it. Maybe it's like a oil. It wasn't very clear what he did with it exactly. He said, but maybe it wouldn't even be royal achila. Okay, and all of it comes from really a thing that the Chazon Ish says. The Chazon Ish says, Rosham Zalman says the same, right? The Chazon Ish says, he says, when you decide something is royal achila, he says, don't think about where you got it from. Okay? If you think of something as being meraglayim, of course you're going to think it's not royal achila. He says, that doesn't work. You have to test it on someone, on a nebuch, an unknown bystander. You know what I mean? Tell him, just give him a cup and say, here, there's a new flavor of Pepsi. How would you like it? You want to see if it tastes. If they think that they're getting meraglayim, of course they're going to think it's not royal achila. Okay, if you think you're getting a shulya shachamar, does anybody know whether a shulya shachamar nertzvah tastes good or not? How should I know? Maybe it's a delicacy. We don't know. To us, it sounds repulsive, but it's only because we were thinking about what it is. But if someone served it to you with salt and pepper on it, maybe you think it was good. Okay, so that's where they're coming from. Is that don't be so quick to judge things as being maybe this lanolin is royal achila. Who knows? That's where they're coming from. Okay, but this heter, if it would be true, if it would be true that it would be considered Pirsha, is much more grounded than what Rebelsky said. Because, as we've said, when something is the actual Isser, then it's only, and it's not Roy Lachila, as soon as it becomes Roy Lachila, it becomes back to being Usser. But when something is Pirsha, if when it left the body, it was not Roy Lachila, it's designated as Pirsha, it's mutter forever. The fact that it became edible later makes no difference to us. So this is a much more grounded heter than what the way Rebelsky was trying to say. If we say it left the body, not that it was not Roy Lachila, it left the body and it was Pirsha, then we're in business. If we say it left the body as Pirsha, then the fact that later it became Roy Lachila, no one cares less. Okay, now, it's hard to say Rebelsky meant that because he has, I told you, the bulk of what he has to write about is how it's really here, and it's not a separate thing, and it's really part of the animal, and it is the here, and here is mutter. Well, that's all working against trying to say that it's Pirsha. Pirsha is to say it's a separate thing. It's not the here. It's this liquid that's on top of the here, and it's considered just the Pirsha, and therefore we can give it the more cowl look at it and say, once it became not Rosh, it'll be mutter food. Okay?
Belsky's right from the it's still good right. You might not like to understand it, but it's still good right. We're worried about the fact that it's touching our tongue.
Well, so, okay. If you want to say that it's Pirsha, that the Gemara understood that way, it would be a good right. But his own right, the etzem, his way, is not really right. At that point, it's not Roy Lachila. When it's not Roy Lachila, at that point,
to use in the thing.
Yeah, because right now it's not Roy Lachila. If you could do 10 steps to make Roy Lachila, for now it makes no difference.
So legs of a near.
You could call that if it makes, yeah, okay. So it happens to be that these people I mentioned, this, you should.
Why did the bleeds go into the foods? Maybe then now it's Roy Lachila.
We usually, if we see something that to us that's not Roy Lachila, we have a piece of wax, we assume when it gets into the next one it's going to be just as not Roy Lachila. If we did 10 steps, we have a way today of making it into vitamin D. But basically, if you take wax and you make sablia, we assume it doesn't.
You make it edible, the vitamin D, or it's just enhanced in the milk?
That's a good question. Usually what we say is that if something is used as a food ingredient, then that means it's Roy Lachila. It doesn't have to taste good, as in, like you could drink a cup of it. If you could use it as a food, that's a different question.
Just there.
Just an additive.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, it's a fair question. Whether something that's not really as a food ingredient, it's just an additive.
What does gelatin do to marshmallows? I have no idea.
It solidifies it, holds it together.
Holds it together.
Gels it,
Gel?
Which that's the same thing that it does in the bones. It also solidifies it. Okay. So it happens to say this person, this Yeshua's Moshe, okay, the Yeshua's Moshe wants to declare, he actually declares about maybe it should be considered the animal itself. He says maybe it's chalev, like chalev of the animal. It's like from the animal's fat. Rabbi Blythe said that he's making a mistake. Rabbi Blythe wrote an article about this. He says this Yeshua's Moshe is making a mistake. He says because it's called wool fat. So he got this impression that it's really wool fat. He says it's really not wool fat. He says it doesn't come from the animal. He says it's a secretion. I'll tell you more about that in a second. It's really a secretion, and it would qualify, so to speak, as a Yotzeh. And this other sefer that I mentioned is Kosher Eifrit from Dain Padua. He wants to say that it's mukh because of the shach. He doesn't even mention this Rosh. If I remember, he doesn't mention it. He just says the shach says it's mutter, so it's mutter. Okay, so he's comfortable from that side, just saying that it's mukh because of that. Okay. Our last reason to consider is like this. There's a person, I believe, who's in B'nai Brak, named Mordechai Gross, and there's a journal that comes out called Ben Siv HaCholov. Okay, about dairy items in the Sifha Challah. I think Tuva prints it, if I remember. And he brings this Chesed Eifod and Yeshua's Moshe. He brings his sefer, and he says he's clearing. He's not really saying very much about what they had to say, but then he says, he'd heard from experts Shazea Zu Ain Shumin Habas. So it's not the animal itself. El haflata v'zeh shell, whatever. He says b'chulu, like you're supposed to understand what he means. Just coming out of the animal. Then came lek b'zeh b'shum yotzeh v'lachai v'shari b'zeh b'behemet tahira, which is to say, I think he comes from the neighbor. It's like the Chazanish says. It's like the Shach says it's mutter. He wants it mutter just because of the Shach. Okay. He says once he decides that it's not the animal itself, well then it's just a yotzeh. Well, yotzeh is mutter. He doesn't say he needs a Shach.
He didn't say it. Just
right. So he doesn't. And the Pretori says almost exactly the same thing. He's not talking about Lanolin, but Rabbi Gross is talking about Lanolin. But the Pretori is talking about a similar thing, and he says it the same kind of way, which is, we don't like the Shach. Okay, but that's fine. I didn't need to tell you that because of the Shach. So when I saw this, I said, that it's Kazeh Ba'ama, and that reminded me, and that, all of you know Rabbi Zwicker from the OU, who said, he wrote in one, you don't know who it is? Okay, person who works at the OU. I've been there for many years. Yeah, he says, who says, that the OU, now, I asked him where he got this from, where the quote came from, He wasn't sure where he got it from. But he said was that the OU considers it to be mutter because it's like sweat. Okay? So what he used to say, the person on the top didn't mean that. When he said Shazay Zu, he didn't mean that. But once I saw that, this Rabbi Zwicka thing made a lot of sense to me, which is, I said to you before when we talked about Colostrum, that there are things that are so down below that they're not even qualified as a Yotzeh. They're lower than that even. So when you think of Zeya, now technically, scientifically, lanolin is not Zeya. It comes up from a different gland than the sweat comes from an animal. But to a sort of a lay perspective, this stuff is Zeya-like. It's coming. You have a thing, and there's this liquid oozing out of the thing, like Zeya, not like sweat comes out of your body and comes onto the thing. And when we use that term, that something is Zeya, it's to say is it's not even qualified as anything. It's just like water coming out of the thing. Okay? So to me, that was a third possible heter to say, which is what Rabbi Zwicka is saying. I haven't pinned it down yet to an official person saying that, but Rabbi Zwicka said it. That it's mutter, and just Rabbi goes it's just like I caught it, even though he didn't mean to say that. That he didn't say that it's Zeya. I spelled it wrong. Yeah, but that it's Zeya. That another reason so the first two reasons we can say that it's not royal achila or it's pirsha. Since it's not royal achila, we qualify as pirsha. The third is to say that the lanolin is just like the colostrum that we said, or like the chol of zachar. About the chol of zachar that we said that there are certain things that are so like nothing that we call it zeya b'alma. Just it's a terminology that is zeya b'alma. That would be a reason to be matter. Even so, you should know there are people who don't use it, who consider it to be usher. But those are reasons to be matter.